A father will spend 30 years in prison for the death of his 2-month-old baby. A judge sentenced LaShawn Holloway back on December 20th, 2019. Officers found the little baby unresponsive on Woodcock Lane. That baby later died. Holloway was convicted of second-degree murder during a trial in August of 2024.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was just another night, or so it seemed. No one knew the tragic horror that was unfolding behind closed doors. A baby girl's life was slipping away in the silence of a room, and no one heard a thing. But what really happened behind those walls? Who could do something so brutal, to someone so helpless? Was this just another tragic accident or the dark consequence of hidden rage? Stay with us. The truth is more shocking than you can imagine. There was nothing remarkable about that night. Not at first. No screams. No breaking glass. Just the hum of a quiet house, the sound of a father, at least for a moment, unaware of the devastation he'd cause. But then came the silence. The kind of silence that chills your bones, the kind you know deep down isn't right. Behind every crime is a face, a person who could have stopped it, someone who could have intervened. But in this case, that person didn't. LaShawn Holloway wasn't just a father, he was a man with a past, one that could have warned everyone. But no one knew. No one saw the signs. Not until it was too late. This was not a crime born of a single moment. It was the culmination of a history written in the cracks of Holloway's own soul. A father's anger, a daughter's fate sealed long before that night. On December 20th, 2022, a 2-month-old girl's life ended. She had no idea she was living her last day. She never knew the depths of rage her father was capable of. And now, we must ask, why did this happen? Who could do such a thing? Tonight, we will walk through the details, through the twisted, heart-wrenching journey of this crime. We'll hear from the detectives, the family members, and the experts. And, perhaps most chilling of all, we'll hear from the man at the center of it all. A man who seemed to hide his darkness beneath the facade of a loving father. This isn't just a story about a man who failed his daughter. It's a story of how the cracks in a broken past can destroy everything in their path. And now, the truth must come to light. LaShawn Holloway. Born into hardship, raised by a broken family, with a history of violence and neglect. But could anyone have predicted the monster he would become? The scars of his childhood were invisible at first, but they were there. No child is born with violence in their heart, but LaShawn was shaped by the world around him, shaped by neglect, by instability, by a mother who couldn't care for him and a father who never showed up. From a young age, Holloway's life was marked by chaos. Juvenile detention. Failed relationships. Run-ins with the law. He had a reputation for aggression, but the worst was yet to come. As an adult, the pattern didn't change. He was arrested multiple times driving under the influence, petty larceny, possession of a concealed weapon. It seemed that no matter how hard he tried, his past clung to him like a shadow, always pulling him back. It was a downward spiral, a path he couldn't seem to break free from, no matter how many chances he was given. The streets, the prison cells, the legal systems, each of them became a cage that shaped him, carved his personality into something dark and twisted. And yet, despite his record, he never seemed to be truly held accountable. No one understood the magnitude of the man he was becoming, the monster that had been slowly growing within him. The system gave him chances. His family gave him chances. But for Holloway, every second chance only brought him closer to the point of no return. Holloway's story is not an isolated one. His life, a product of the system's failures, of a family too broken to heal itself, could have been the story of many others. Children who grow up in neglect, who are left to fend for themselves, not knowing how to navigate the complexities of love, loss, and anger. But in LaShawn's case, something more sinister happened. His unresolved rage, his twisted understanding of power, came to a head. And when it did, there would be no turning back. And so, LaShawn Holloway became a man trapped in his own history. A man unable to escape the anger that defined him. Each decision was a step further down the same path he'd been on since childhood, one that led to the inevitable. As Holloway's life continued, it became clear that he was not only running from his past but also running towards something darker. With each conviction, each failed attempt at redemption, the man he could have been slipped further away. The walls closed in. The anger only grew. By the time December 20th, 2022, came around, LaShawn Holloway was a man on the edge, one who had never been shown the way to step back. And so, when tragedy struck, it wasn't a surprise. It was the consequence of years of anger left to fester, a boiling pot finally overflowing. The haunting truth about LaShawn Holloway's past was that, much like his anger, it was never really hidden. It was always there, in plain sight. The pieces of his story, the warning signs, the fractured relationships, they were there, for anyone willing to see them. But no one looked closely enough. And now, as we prepare to dive deeper into the events of that fateful night, we must ask ourselves, could anyone have seen this coming? Could someone have stopped it before it was too late? The truth is, LaShawn Holloway wasn't born a monster. He was made into one, by the world that failed him. And the real tragedy? The world didn't even know it until it was too late. This is the face of innocence. A 2-month-old girl, just beginning to discover the world around her. But it was a world that would take her life in the most unimaginable way. She had no way of knowing that the hands meant to nurture her were the same ones that would steal her life. She had no way of knowing that the man she trusted most, the man who should have loved her, was the one who would destroy her future. LaShawn Holloway was supposed to be her protector. But that day, the violence that had simmered for years exploded. Her cries, once filled with need and comfort, began to stop. The innocence she had known was fading, and with it, the last moments of peace. One moment, a child playing in her crib. The next, a father's anger boiling over, consuming everything in its path. This child had done nothing wrong. She had no knowledge of the pain that would take her from this world. She had no chance to understand that the man she loved, the man who was supposed to care for her, would be the one to end her life. The baby's innocence, her laughter, her trust in the world, had been taken from her in an instant. But the real tragedy lies not just in the violence that ended her life but in the story that had led to it, a story of neglect, abuse, and a broken system that had failed her before she even had a chance to speak. She was just 2 months old. Barely starting her life, barely beginning to see the world for the first time. And now, her life was over, cut short by the very person who should have been her guardian, her protector. Her cries, her need, her helplessness, all ignored. What happened to her wasn't an accident. It was the result of a lifetime of choices made by a man who had long since abandoned his humanity. Her story ends here. But the tragedy of her death, its ripple effect, will continue far beyond this moment. The discovery came too late. The baby, once full of life, was found unresponsive. Her small body was still, too still. And in that stillness, everything changed. The scene shifts quickly to the frantic emergency moments. Paramedics rush into the room, their movements urgent but methodical. The baby is immediately placed on a stretcher, her tiny body still, like a fragile doll. The camera pans over the faces of the first responders, panic mixed with professional detachment, as if they've seen too much of this before, but nothing could have prepared them for what was coming. Seconds felt like hours. But by the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. The baby was rushed to the hospital, her life hanging by a thread. Her small body was broken in ways unimaginable. 26 rib fractures, a fractured skull, bruising to her chest wall. These weren't just accidents. These were signs of systematic abuse. There were no accidents here. No simple falls, no misunderstandings. This was the result of someone who had chosen violence, over and over again. A child's cries were silenced, not by accident, but by years of rage and neglect that had finally spilled over. Her death wasn't just a tragedy. It was the culmination of years of failure, a failure that had been buried beneath layers of lies and neglect. A failure by a father who was supposed to protect her but instead was the one who shattered her world. Her name would forever be tied to tragedy. Her smile, her laughter, the innocence she never had the chance to fully experience, now a memory. And for LaShawn Holloway? His actions would soon catch up with him. The weight of what he had done would soon be revealed to the world, but for the baby girl who had been his daughter, it was already too late. She would never have a chance to grow up. To laugh, to run, to fall in love with the world around her. Her story was stolen before it even began. Her family would never be the same again. They would live with the memory of her innocence, of the joy she brought into their lives, now overshadowed by the tragedy of her death. But in her death, one thing remained clear: the truth had to come to light. Her innocence was stolen. And now, the truth will finally come to light. The injuries didn't add up. No parent could cause this much damage by accident. This was a crime of brutality. As the investigation unfolded, Holloway's past became central to the case. What was he hiding? What did he do in those final moments with his daughter? Detectives combed through Holloway's criminal record, finding a disturbing pattern of behavior: previous convictions for child abuse, neglect, and violence. But this time, they weren't looking at a crime of neglect. This was something much worse. Interviews with his family and friends revealed a history of anger and outbursts that had been ignored or downplayed for far too long. But the defense was weak. Holloway's lies couldn't cover up the truth. The verdict. The trial dragged on for weeks, each day filled with twists, turns, and emotional moments. But the conclusion was inevitable. As the jury deliberated, the tension in the room was palpable. Holloway's defense was no match for the mountain of evidence stacked against him. The jury finds Holloway guilty of second-degree felony murder and child abuse. The judge sentences him to 50 years in prison, 20 suspended. Justice was served, but at a cost. A young life lost. A father condemned. A family forever broken. What drives a man to do this? Anger? Resentment? Or something deeper, darker? Was this a premeditated crime, or did something snap? Was it premeditated? Or did the violence simply erupt from the depths of years of unresolved rage? Holloway's inability to process his emotions, his constant need to exert control, and his history of abuse all contributed to a moment of complete destruction. For Holloway, the anger he had buried for so long exploded, and in that explosion, his daughter became the tragic victim. For the family, the pain is unimaginable. How do you forgive someone who's taken away your loved one in such a violent way? The pain for the family was not just about the loss of a child, it was about the betrayal. The man they had known, the father who should have been her protector, had become the very person who took her life. The wounds were deep, and the scars would last forever. Grandmother, interview. It's hard to explain how it feels. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to be with us, growing up, laughing, learning, and now, she's gone. And I have to live with that. I have to live with the fact that her life was taken by the one person who should have loved her most. How do you even begin to forgive someone who has stolen your child from you? For the family, the road to healing seemed impossible. Holloway's actions had shattered their world, and no amount of time would ever bring their little girl back. The family's grief, though unbearable, transformed into something greater, a commitment to never let their daughter's death be in vain. They vowed to honor her memory by speaking out, by ensuring that others would hear their story, by fighting for children who couldn't fight for themselves. Through their pain, they found strength. Through their sorrow, they found purpose. And in their darkest moment, they found a way to keep their daughter's spirit alive. For the family, healing would be a long and painful journey. But they were determined. They would remember the laughter, the joy, and the hope that their baby girl had brought into their lives. And they would use that memory to fuel their fight, to make sure that her story wasn't just a tragedy, but a call to action. In the end, the consequences were far-reaching. For Holloway, the bars of a prison cell. For his daughter, an early grave. For Holloway, the life he had once known was gone forever. He was now a convicted man, locked away for a crime he could never undo. His past had caught up with him, and the weight of his actions would now follow him for the rest of his life. But even in prison, there would be no escape from the reality of what he had done. There would be no forgiveness, no redemption. His fate was sealed, but the family he left behind was still left to pick up the pieces. The grief that the victim's family carries with them is unfathomable. The loss of a child is something no parent should ever have to endure, but in this case, the pain is compounded by the violent, senseless way her life was taken. The community, too, felt the ripple effects of this tragedy. Holloway's actions shattered not only his own family but also the sense of safety within the community. No one likes to believe that something like this could happen in their neighborhood. The crime left a scar on everyone who heard the story, a reminder that even in seemingly peaceful homes, there can be darkness lurking behind closed doors. What could have been done differently? Could this tragedy have been prevented? We'll never know the answer for sure. The signs were there: Holloway's criminal history, his volatile temperament, and his failure to control his anger. But no one knew just how far he was willing to go. Was it a lack of intervention? A failure of the system to support him when he needed help the most? Or was it simply the culmination of years of unresolved anger and pain that led to the ultimate destruction? These are the questions that will never have easy answers. And perhaps that's what makes this case so disturbing, its senselessness. It's not just a story about a man committing a crime. It's a story about a system that failed a child, a family that was left in the wake of destruction, and a community that had to come to terms with the fact that something this violent could happen so close to home. What does this say about trust, anger, and the dangers lurking in our homes? How many of us are unaware of the quiet struggles that take place behind closed doors? How often do we turn a blind eye to the pain and frustration of those around us? And when does that pain finally snap? It's a question that leaves us all unsettled. We look at the people around us, at our families, at our neighbors, and we wonder, could we have done something to stop this? Could we have seen the signs, heard the cries, or intervened in a way that would have saved a life? The story of LaShawn Holloway is a reminder: no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. And sometimes, the monsters in our midst are the ones we least expect. We see the grave of the baby girl, a small, simple headstone marking the spot where her life ended. Flowers are placed gently around it, a tribute to the life that never had a chance to blossom. Her life, her story, will live on in the memories of those who loved her. But the pain of her absence will never fade. For the family, this is the beginning of a long journey, one they never thought they would have to take. And though justice has been served, the damage done can never be undone. This story, like so many others, is a reminder of the dangers that can exist in the places we least expect. A home, a father, a child, seemingly safe, yet hiding a darkness no one saw coming. Every year, thousands of children suffer in silence. And far too often, that silence leads to tragedy. But there is hope. There are people and organizations working every day to stop the abuse before it begins. By raising awareness, by supporting those in need, we can make a difference. We must make a difference. Though justice was served, it came at a high cost. A family was torn apart, a community left shaken, and a young life was stolen. And for LaShawn Holloway, his story is now forever defined by the violence he chose to inflict on an innocent child. But let this be a lesson for all of us: no matter how much we may wish to forget, these stories matter. They remind us that our children are vulnerable, and that we must protect them at all costs. And perhaps, in remembering them, we can ensure that no more lives are shattered like this one.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.